Hello and welcome to another Artis Opus tutorial. Again, we're on the Soulblight Gravelords, the new vampires, and again, we're trying to copy something, whereas last time we were trying to cover that beautiful artwork from the front of the book and make that come into play on this miniature here. We're trying to do a metallic version of the classic Blood Knight scheme. So basically that is red armor on the horse and red armor on the rider, with it being a bit brighter on the rider. Games Workshop have done it just with, non-metallic paints. I wanted this to be a bit shinier, a bit deeper, and a bit more evil and blood-like though. I think we've done a pretty good job of that. Turned out really well, using similar methods to the recent Vampire Lord. Look at that. They look pretty evil, and all of this is fun to do, and the majority of this is dry brushing or washing / contrast use. So it turned out really well, really good fun. Let's jump in and see how it goes. Of course, like a load of modern cavalry, the rider is comprehensively and not removably attached to the mount. So we're just gonna have to work around that. And for this reason, I'm gonna be approaching the painting of this in a, everything's gonna be painted in the same way until we get to the washes stage. And we'll use that washes stage as a way to separate the red armor on the rider from the red armor on the mount. Shouldn't be too tricky, but I think covering that in the kind of the after processes rather than the foundations is a very sensible way to go. Don't know what head I'm going to use yet, but I think it might be largely affected by just how tiny this head is. If you compare that to the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, this is about a quarter of the size. It's absolutely tiny. I've left the arm off, I've left the shield off. Seems like a sensible decision now. I can always glue them on later if I need to. Anyway, awesome model. Let's prime it and rock on. I'm going to keep this picture pretty close while I'm working because obviously I don't want to put, I could dry brush the entire thing, but a load of it is flesh, a load of it is cloth, etc. So this will just make sure I don't miss any, like little ankle armors or bits like that on the horses. And size-wise, I'm actually going to be using a small for a fair bit of this. That is because at least for the base coat, the first coat of this dry brushing, I need to be able to get everywhere. So using a huge brush, I do prefer, and I feel the quality of coverage is better, but I'm going to need to get into these nooks and crannies and stuff like that. So for the first one at least, we'll just be using a small. We've done most of the work in our previous step, and actually things get way faster at this point. I am timing myself just to see how long this takes. Anyway, so the first step is going to be to check we still got some moisture in there. Retributor first. And then a little bit of the silver. The silver is mega strong. Work it into the brush, move the excess. Go somewhere where we think it's going to be hard to make a mistake. So on this kind of, aggressive wing detail, I think we're good. All right, we're safe. And at that point, we're just going to buff it up. Now, even if it doesn't look like it's doing much, we know that there is silver in this brush, and this will be laying a foundation for a transition. So don't worry about it too much. It's worth spending the 10 or 20 seconds to cover the lot, even if you think you've not got enough coverage. Back to the dampening pad. Try again, just for a little bit more. And then because we're working on our texture palette here, we can see what color it was last time. We'll just aim for going a tiny bit brighter than that. Again, work it in, work off the excess, straight back to the same section. Okay, we're good there. And buff it up. Tiny bit more silver. Work it in. So I'm just going to jump between the dampening pad to help the paint leave the brush in order to not build up, unnecessary excess, and then grabbing a bit more of the silver and a bit more of the gold until I'm happy with this stage of coverage. I'm going to test out a couple of mixes here. So essentially, I've worked out that because the red is going to be the stronger color, I think it makes sense to do the yellow first, to not have to be too delicate with the yellow or worry about overspill too much, and then to be very delicate and precise with the red. The red is going all over the model. It is, you know, the MVP here, so we should be being more delicate with that anyway. But I need to work out how I'm going to make sure these look super gold. Now I could leave them here. This is a kind of old gold look, which would fit with Blood Knights. But what I'm going to do is just test out quickly on my palette, either Cassandra or a Yandin. They are a very, very similar color. Very similar color. So on the bit of my palette that is the right color, pop down a little bit of this on this corner here. So Cassandra on the left. Wash out my brush. Okay, so Yandin is quite a soft one. I think the Cassandra is going to work out better for us. And I think by the looks of it, we won't need to dilute it, but I will be ready to do so. So I'll go in thin. And then what I'm actually going to do is I could test it on the shield, but there's something that is less important here on the little dangly bit. So let's give one of these a go. Let's give this partially hidden head. Far too heavy, mop it up. Okay, now I think if we go at that level, it may well obliterate detail. I'll try and do one more with the much thinner layer. It is quite strong. I do not want it that strong, so that's why we test in small areas of the model. Grab some contrast medium. Upset everyone by dipping straight in. Sorry guys. And let's give it another go. We can fix these little areas quite easily if need to be. All right, that's better. So we did need to dilute it. And we don't want too much on the brush, importantly. At some point we have to commit, so let's see what we can do for this shield. We have, of course, picked the one shield that has a single area of it that is in question, this bit here, but I think we're just going to turn the wings gold for now because we can always change this later. The wings and the skull, and we'll leave this bottom section. Now the other thing about doing these gold ones first is they are the raised details, so it's more likely that they overspill, and it's less likely that the red sections kind of seep upwards. So again, that's another reason to do it this way around. All right, so we are good. Let's leave that to dry. Check out how it looks once it has dried. I might have gone a little bit soft there, but better too soft than too heavy. And at that point, we're good to go this detail all over the model, and then I can stop procrastinating and cover it in red, which I'm actually quite scared about because this looks pretty awesome as it is. We haven't actually put down the red because it's not that I'm procrastinating, but I realized that it probably makes sense at this point to base coat the other sections. Then I realized, having base coated them, they're all perfect for dry brushing anyway. So what I'm going to do is give these a little bit of a dry brush. The reason for doing that now is because any overspill I get will pretty much be hidden by the red stage. So it makes sense to do your things in, you know, reverse order of messiest first. And I'm pretty passionate about sequencing your painting and trying to make it more enjoyable and more practical in this way. So something that I thought I would talk about. Colors wise, I've just gone for Incubi Darkness and Rhinox Hide and a mix of them 50-50 for the horse himself for those additional details. So yeah, I'll do a little bit of dry brushing and then we will get to the red. And hopefully it works. I know this is going to seem pretty strange, but the color I'm going to be highlighting with is Thunderhawk Blue. I thought about Fenrisian Grey, but I do think it's a little bit light. However, we are going to wash over these, so maybe you could get away with using Fenrisian. The reason for considering these colors is because they're cool, and I've tried to use a bit of blue in different areas of the model, and I don't see any reason why not to continue with that theme here. So the idea is we're just going to be, again, you know, I'm referring to the artwork here. It looks like a lot of the colors are very similar between, you know, the robes on the model itself, the vampire, the robes on the horse, the reins, they're all within the same spectrum, the skin of the horse, anything like that seems to be highlighted basically up to an off gray. So I'm going to do the same thing, and this is the one that I'm choosing. Should look perfect on the Incubi sections. Let's see how they go. It might indeed be a bit too subtle on them, but I think if we're patient, we'll manage to build up some more pretty techie highlighting. Ideally that people will tell us isn't dry brushed, because Always the best compliment. So remember, these browns are still going to be washed further, so if it seems a bit weird them going to blue, don't worry about it. It will get knocked back. All right, we're good. So I think that actually works quite nicely. The skull I'm going to do separately. I want it to stand out. It's quite, you know, bleached bone should stand out in comparison to everything else we've got going on. So I'll do that separately in terms of the color palette, but this is looking absolutely fine for me. I think this should be spot on. Okay, so the robes are actually looking really good. I don't think I will have any need to wash them after this. They're coming out really nicely. So I'm going to jump with the brush, which I haven't cleaned off fully. I'm going to work this in the Fenrisian to our Thunderhawk blue. I know from Space Wolves that this is a lovely color. Transition to go between. I'm going to carefully buff this up. I will probably jump to an extra small to catch some of the details, just because you don't want to start spilling over overly. It doesn't matter if you do a tiny bit, because we're going to be hitting it with a very bold full-on red anyway, but I might buff these little points here that I've caught back up to gold. No more screwing about. It doesn't matter if I'm cacking it. We're going to grab Flesh Terror's red and Voluptuous pink as per our previous Vampire Lore tutorial. A little bit of contrast medium, and then I am going to be prepared with an additional secret ingredient. This is glaze medium. It's a Vallejo product and it promotes transparency. So I've got that ready. What I am going to do is test on the shield. I'm going to have to work out some way to hold this so I don't screw it up. I'm going to test on the shield after testing on the palette, and then finally at that point we'll go onto the model, because I am slightly worried about ruining what I think is looking pretty cool already. It's just gold instead of red. Just going to make sure with a slightly moistened finger that my palette well is clean. The rest of it's super dusty, but this bit needs to be clean, otherwise anything will show up really obviously in these. Shake these a lot, and then let's go. So I'll mix it up in the well, then we'll test it in our palette. And for now, let's just go for one. Scary color. One. Now people often ask me, what situations would I not dip the brush in if I hadn't cleaned it? That's one of them. These colors are just too strong. Would not even risk it. One, two. Okay. Still looks scary, doesn't it? It is such a blood-like color, so at least I know that I am roughly right. Test it here. Looking pretty good. And then at this point, you know, there's nothing more I can do to procrastinate, so let's rock on. Consistency seems about right. Remember, we are being super careful with this because we're trying to protect and maintain that yellow gold. Making sure not to forget the edges. And also trying to avoid any unnecessary pooling. We can give it 2 coats if needs be, that's absolutely fine. Got to be careful here because this is going to run down and pull pretty heavily against, due to gravity, against that gold section. So I'm going to go everywhere but up to that gold now. Just make sure that there's the minimum amount left on the brush. And then that bit will be done extremely carefully. Now it's not got the blue on, which added a lot of depth to the Lord, but I think we are on the right track. So it actually looks pretty cool where it has pulled and gone, you know, slightly too thick there, and I've used it more like a traditional contrast. Maybe that's because of how bright the base coat is. So I'm going to put down another layer, definitely on the bottom. There we go, that's how we want it to look. If it could just stay like that looks when it's wet, I would be overjoyed. So we're going to have to work out how to achieve that. It might be that this one does need a varnish. We didn't varnish the Lord, but maybe this would benefit from it. We are looking pretty good. The best section so far in my mind is this one. That is about the level that we should have been going for. So I've actually added 4 more drops of contrast medium into there, and I've dropped in a couple of drops of the glaze medium that I mentioned that should help promote transparency. So we're now on our second coat for everywhere. Let's see how this looks. couple of the areas have gone a little heavy. This is still my favorite section. I think I should have just gone a little bit lighter with the first stage, and also made it in a larger batch so it wasn't as affected by evaporation, because I do think that's made a difference. It's pretty hot in the UK at the moment, and all my windows are closed because I'm recording, so that's had an effect on it as well. What we're going to do now is jump onto the Huldra Blue stage. So we've got a little bit of Huldra Blue, a fair bit of water, and then very importantly, also quite a lot of contrast medium. And the reason the contrast medium is in there is because we want something that has the same finish, the same shininess, and the same properties as the rest of our armor, just to help tie things in. So the closer it is in properties, the less delicate we have to be with it, the less it'll stand out, and the more forgiving it'll be. So there's not really any downsides whatsoever. And what I'm going to do is, as well as using it to separate panel lines here, like between the gold and the red, which will make it look pretty lovely, I'm going to be taking it and just pushing it into recesses or anywhere where I think it will add a little bit of exaggeration. So into the neck here. Now you can put it wherever you want to exaggerate anything. So in these dip sections, this is what I did on the Vampire Lord and it looked pretty nice. You're just using it to sneak in some depth where you wouldn't be able to get it normally. This armor is not short in steps though, that's for sure. So when in doubt, just put it in next to any step up. And you'll be surprised when it dries, both how cool it looks and hopefully also how subtle it looks. Like you can already see that this is dried. Look how natural that looks. And that is because we've kept the same consistency pretty much all the way across the model. It's all got a GW finish, which is slightly satiny, or a bit more than that with the contrast. So when I'm talking about the more efficient way to do things when diluted, I'll show you what I mean. I've just watered down our mix a little bit more than normal, and rather than obsessively placing it, as long as you don't go too heavy, so you're not encouraging pooling. You can absolutely use it like that. With a more heavily diluted mix, I've worked out how I'm going to darken the rest of it, and it's going to look pretty scary at this point, but I'm fairly sure this is a good way to go about it. So we've got a heavily diluted version of the blue mix, and it is going all over. I'm just trying to make sure that it pools in the places I want it to. Because we've used contrast medium so much in this, it's maintained quite a thick body. So what that means is you don't necessarily have to be working with gravity for it to do what you want. So as long as you drag up against the edges that you wish to be caught, like these, and don't make any major mistakes, you should be absolutely fine. So even though you'd think that this would pull downwards in the opposite place, it's going to be attracted to the recesses because of its consistency, and you should be all right. So with this, a couple of stages, which we'll have to leave to dry properly and stuff, but a couple of stages of this should darken down the armor on the horse quite significantly, and do it in a cool fashion, which is kind of cohesive with the overall intent that we've got for the piece. Okay, now it pays dividends to be as careful as possible with this. It might be one for a 2M or something like that, but I'm going to see how it looks. I think it looks pretty good actually like this. Nice, looks a little bit more battle worn like that, but these guys are meant to have seen combat, so. Okay, so I'll show you dry brushing on a small section, and then I'm actually going to hop to the non-dry brushing version of this. So you absolutely can pick out edges in that manner. I think what I'm going to do though is grab a 1 or a 2M, grab a 1 here, and try that. Slightly weird and creative way to use this brush, but useful to have in your arsenal. So you're removing a lot of paint here. Your brush may start splaying as it dries. That's just what happens if you're using a brush which, you know, is too dry. But that's kind of what we're going for this. So I think maybe removing a little bit less and just being extremely careful with the pressure. Yeah, there we go. After learning how much evaporation affects the mix already, I'm going to put a couple of drops of water in it to wake it back up. And proceed with quite a lot of caution. Yeah, this is absolutely fine. So all over the rider's armour, and I might do some of it on the upwards facing bits of the horse's armour too. None of this would be necessary if I'd used more thinned down versions of this in the first place, so you can learn from my mistakes. After that stage, we are pretty much done. I'm just going to pop this all together and then rock it through the details. I'm using Rakarth Flesh for the bone and the hooves and the face as well. I'll pop down some washes, and pretty much all of this will have been completed using washing or, you know, dipping techniques, which is going to mean that it can definitely be condensed to be faster. You know, I wouldn't have had to go back and make things, try and make things more vibrant again if I hadn't made them too dark, stuff like that. But this is a technique that can be hacked to be faster and faster and faster and faster. So let's pop him back together and then just wash everything and we'll be pretty much sorted. I'm at the point where I'm trying to pick which head goes on this guy. Rather than guess at anything, I'm just going to hold them both in place and see which one looks the most effective. We've got the guy's lance on. The hooves and the metallic details have been washed with a mix of, it's just non-oil and then the blue that we've still got in our palette. So if I show you on this detail here, just basically a darker blue. It's gone on the bone as well, on the hooves, everything. Those could probably benefit with the dry brush. Heads though. So basically it's just which of these looks the best. These heads are tiny, really, really small. So first impression on the light one, quite like the sneer. This one has got, that's better. That is a better head. Okay, I will paint this guy's chin and then rock him on. Here he is again. I think this is very successful in terms of, like, we pretty much achieved exactly our objective that we set at the start of the video. You know, we've got a more bluey black deep version of the armor. I would have had the rider be a bit more bright. That's definitely something that we super easily fixed because you just dilute more. I'd do that in the next one, and I may be painting some more of these. I quite enjoy this process, so they may make their way into my army. You know, I think we got pretty close to that. Couple of things to note. So you can dilute more if you want stuff to stay brighter. It is very tempting to carry on putting down the layers and layers because each time you put them on, they look so deep and so saturated before they're fully dried that they look awesome. It's just tempting. Try and resist. Trust me on that one. Do try and resist going too far with it. Otherwise, you'll basically just base coat them a kind of cool red, but you could have done that without having to do all the metallics before if you obscure them. And I think kind of at the most, that is the level that we could be going for in terms of it showing through. So just thinning our mix a bit more would really help us achieve that. Very, very enjoyable. There are a lot of steps that could be missed out. So I'm gonna run through a couple of them now because I appreciate some of you may want to get armies on the table super quick. You could go immediately from a gold dry brush, take the same brush, go to silver and do a light silver dry brush. So just 2 steps there, no intermediaries. That would be super doable. You could use a larger brush and leave stuff, the recesses darker. That's absolutely fine because they're getting coated anyway. That might indeed, you know, actually look better. That's something that I've considered myself. The washes, as long as you don't make them too thick, like I did and have to do some overwork and trying to fix it, you could just do like 1 wash all over with a contrast mix, or 2 washes all over or something like that. And the blue, if you dilute further like I did, you can put it all over rather than having to, you know, specifically target on the recesses. Those steps would make an absolutely huge difference. Final one, and this is a little bit crazy and out there, if you were to spray the model with Retributor Armour as your first step and then dry brush it with silver, you could have a very, very, very bright and vibrant base for putting your washes over, and you could then go in and base coat the other areas. I don't think it'd save as much time as you think, because you would have to go in and base coat the other areas specifically and quite delicately, but you know, I think it could lead to a cool result. And given that the cover of the book has such a beautiful depth kind of suggested in that armor there, I think you've got a pretty wide open, you know, you could do anything. It could be as striking as you like, and that would kind of fit with the vibe. Really good fun and very, very forgiving. You know, we've got dry brushing, we've got flat layering, you know, just putting base coats down, and we've got use of washes or contrast. And that is basically it. So this is an extremely efficient way to get an army on the table. Based well, this would look absolutely phenomenal. And people, if they see this, will ask you how you did it, and then probably not quite believe you when you say how simple it was, in terms of, you know, no complex methods or anything like that. Don't let your washes pull too much, and you'll be fine. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you found this useful, if you've enjoyed the extra theory, if you haven't enjoyed the extra theory, or whatever, do please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the comments if you would like to see us tackling anything more interesting. I've appeared again. I do have some more Vampire Counts models, so I could be tempted. I would have to change this one, I think. Probably a little bit, maybe a bit of converting, but I do have more of the Vampire Counts models. I have a Vampire Counts army myself, although it's basically dogs and zombie dragons. Although that's now a viable list, so, you know, I could be tempted to bring them out. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next video.